Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m., Monday, February 11, 2013, for the purpose of a joint meeting with the school board. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Randall?
Here.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Ms. Chandler will call the roll for the school board.
Dr. Daniels. Reverend Fleming.
Present.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Lamb.
Present.
Mr. Nance.
Here.
Mr. Terrence.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker. Mrs. Williams.
Present.
Mr. Bridges.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everyone once again for coming to this annual get-together as we discuss the business of our students, our city affairs, our financial matters, and the hurdles that we see coming forward. Congratulations to the new members to the board. We have all cherished our relationship as working together. We would like to continue in that vein and doing whatever we can do to improve our relationship with our schools and our school systems. And one of the things that we clearly don't want to politicize, and you all know this, is what's in the best interest of our students in our school. I just left the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I'm very proud of the fact that we were not on one of the negative lists.
That's right.
And then I just left Richmond at local officials day, and they mentioned 3 schools in Virginia, and we were not on the list. And so that makes you proud. And again, it's difficult to see school systems and districts and boards not getting along with their councils and going back and forth on who's causing who economic development issues. That matter came up in Virginia First Cities when I was there sitting the other day, and there are some districts that are in favor of the governor and the private sector taking over the school systems that are non-performing because, as in Petersburg case, the mayor says it's costing them about $60 million in economic development. And it troubles me when they can't get together and come to some type of resolution and resulting to legislators in Richmond being able to enact certain things to be able to do that, because no one knows our kids and our system like we do, and that's why we're all here. We're elected officials, and we're here to do the work of the people. So with that, Mr. Chairman, do you have anything before we officially start the meeting?
Just a quick 1 minute, Mayor Wright, members of council, Mr. City Manager, colleagues of the school board, staff, and Dr. Stuckwish. Thank you for this meeting. We've had our first meeting with your liaisons for the opposite first time in 2 years. It was been a little over 2 years since we had a meeting. So I'm glad to see that we got that started back. It gave them a chance to see what is happening and bring one of your new members also up to date. And I think this is the first really joint meeting that we've had that, I don't want to say that we've had negative vibes, but this is one consensus that hopefully we can continue on the right foot. That's what I like to say. Yes, we have a lot to bring to you, and we narrowed it down to 4 items, and hopefully these 4 items will be of interest to you all.
Okay, very good. Who's going to start?
Dr. Stuckwish.
Dr. Stuckwish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Wright, Vice Mayor Cherry, honorable members of City Council, Manager Rowe, our Chairman, Mr. Bridgeford, and our members of our school board and those assembled here tonight, good evening. I want to start off this evening talking about some General Assembly litigation issues. Some of them have a direct impact on what we're talking about tonight. Some of them really are esoteric to schools, but I just want to run through what is going on in Richmond. I was making changes in this up till this afternoon because, as we know, it's very fluid. The General Assembly is sitting. Things are moving very quickly right now. They passed crossover day last week. Each house has the other's bills, and we wait and see what happens. Things move very rapidly this time, as everybody knows who's dealt with them. Got a series of about 6 items that I want to speak to, and then I'll just mention about 12 others that have an impact on schools. First of all, and the one that is of most interest immediately is the 2% teacher raise. I don't know exactly what the bill's called, but everybody just refers to it as the 2% teacher raise. Spoke to, I was meeting with the state superintendent with the group of the regional chairs, which I'm the chair for this region, last Friday, and talked directly to the state superintendent on these issues. So they're fairly current, I think, the information I have to share with you. A 2% increase for teachers at SOQ level of funding has gone through both houses, and it's crossed over now. There's a little bit of difference.
Sorry, what's SOQ level of funding?
SOQ level of funding are the positions in the school system that have to be filled according to the state. We staff at a higher level than that. Everyone staffs at a higher level than that. I think most folks would be shocked if they saw what the level of staffing is that the state actually funds. Everything beyond that we have to fund. So when they say they're funding at that level, that means they're not funding everybody. They're funding just these positions, okay? And then anyone who's not a teacher or a teacher type, and we say teacher type, that includes guidance counselors, librarians, and those folks, they have to have licenses. They're not included in it. We would have to come up with that on our own. The Senate says that we can give 1% or 2%. Of course, if you give 1%, you lose half the state money. Of course, they prorate it on you. And the House has dealt with the flexibility by saying, well, you can give it at the beginning of the year, you can give it in the middle of the year. Of course, if you give it in the middle of the year, you lose half the state money. It's great to see the possibility of giving the teachers a 2% raise, but it does cost us. This is not money that we can use. We have to add money to it, so it actually puts pressure on our budget because the state never funds things fully. You'll find that out. There is some money for support staff. Again, not enough. We would have to offset that. There was money in the governor's budget for what they called strategic compensation, which we were very much going to go after. The governor had proposed $15 million. When that came out of the House, it was reduced to $7.5 million, and then when it came out of the Senate, it was down to $3 million. So when you take $3 million, spread it across the state, that's not that much money left. You know, these figures, when you see them from the state, seem like large figures. But when you start dividing them by all the school divisions in the state, there's not a whole lot that comes down to each division on a lot of these. So we will need, and we'll get back to this as we circle back to the budget, and we'll circle back to just about all these issues. That's why I've picked them out. We'll get back to the idea that there's a need for local funding if that's going to happen. If we don't do it, the revenue that I'm talking about goes down by $900,000. So next is the A to F grading bill that I'm sure you've seen. That's been, it's gone through both houses. What it does is it takes the state accreditation levels and puts a grade on them. Basically, an A is how your schools are accredited, and 25% of your students are passing at what they call advanced pass level, which is a 500 on the SOLs out of a possible 600. Passing is 400. B would be, a B is all the schools are accredited, or a school is accredited to get a B. A C means you missed accreditation in one area. A D means you missed accreditation in more than one area, and an F means you've lost state accreditation. And we'll get back to talking about those a little bit. Exactly when that's going to happen, we don't know, because I believe it was in the Senate version. A growth measure was added to it. We could spend a lot of time talking about growth measures. There's student growth measures, and then they drop that back to the Department of Education. They figure out how to work a growth measure into that. As the state superintendent says, it's kind of a disconnect right now, and they're not sure how they're going to handle that. So something will come out of that, and it just be monitored at this time. As you're aware, General Assembly is still sitting, and the governor hasn't signed off on anything. Opportunity Education Institution, that's what Mayor Wright was talking about. That's where the state will come into a city or a county and take over any schools that have been denied accreditation. I think it's 2 or 3 or 4 years. It takes a while to get down there. It's an interesting issue. They would actually take not just state money, but local money, of which a number of legal counsel from the school board side says that's unconstitutional. You can't take local money. and they would need a constitutional amendment, so we'll wait and see on that. It's not something that is on my radar screen in terms of having an impact on us in Portsmouth right now. The lowest title that's on schools this year are what they call priority schools. We have no priority schools in Portsmouth. The next lowest are what are called focus schools. We have no focus schools right now. And I'll get back to that in a minute, exactly where we are.
Petersburg, Alexandra, and Norfolk.
Yeah, I think there's about eight schools that have been unaccredited for years, so they've been down there.
Be a warning.
What they have to do is set up an opportunity education initiative executive board during next fiscal year, which is 13-14, and this thing would not go into effect until the 14-15 fiscal year before any of this would take place. Another issue with school safety, as you know, is a big issue because of the issue at Sandy Hook Elementary School right before Christmas. There is a committee, a safety committee that's been meeting, a task force. They are still meeting. They do put out recommendations every so often, but they have not concluded their work. One of the issues that we were watching with interest is would there be more money for school resource officers? Now, school resource officer funding is not through education, it's through justice. As it stands right now, they've placed about $1 million into that grant funding program. $1 million, when you spread it across the state, I'm not sure whether that would be enough for one officer. It's not much money, and there is a match involved in that also on the locality side. Another area that's out there is grant being made available for safety equipment for schools. That would be purchased through VPSA, that's for Virginia Public School Authority bonding, like they do their technology loans. And the safety equipment would, like I said, it'd be handled much like technology. However, it would be competitive. It would not be formula funded. So we're waiting to see where that is. We haven't seen any figures on that yet. There would, of course, be matches there also. Also coming out of the safety task force, Governor's safety task force, they're talking about us having to do lockdowns like we do fire drills. We do a fire drill every week in the first month of school, and then we do a fire drill we have to do a fire drill every month for the remainder of the year. They would want to put lockdowns at that level. We do practice lockdowns, but not at that frequency right now. But that's one of the things that is in the bill. The interest in arming principals and arming teachers has kind of waned. That's not out there anymore. CPR is another issue. There is a bill that is moving forward. It's not gotten a lot of publicity, but it's gone through both houses, and that would require all students before they graduate to have CPR training, and it would require all of our teachers to be licensed to have CPR training. This is a massive undertaking. There's a lot of details that are not addressed in the legislation, as there is a lot of time, and it's left the Department of Education to try to figure out what the details are. But the bill is still alive. Because we are heavily state in terms of our orientation in schools, I think most of us think us as local public schools, but all of our rules and regulations come from Richmond. This year there were over 200 bills that were studied and monitored by the VSBA legal team. Of those over 200, of those 85 are still alive in the General Assembly. And some bills, you think they're dead and they come back to life even after crossover. It's amazing the things that go on down there in terms of parliamentary procedure. Just to name some of the things that are going on, the Educator Fairness Act looks like that's gone through both houses. I think it's ready to go to the governor for signing. That will allow local school divisions at their option to extend the probationary period for teachers, to extend from 3 to 5 years to be tenured or to get continuing contract, and it would streamline the grievance procedure, and that gets kind of involved. I don't think we want to talk about that tonight, but that looks like it has gone through. SOQ position flexibility, which allows us to a little more flexibility on how we place folks like guidance counselors, librarians, clerical folks, which is all mandated by the state. The Virginia High School League homeschool student participation bill is still alive. as it has been for a number of years. We're waiting to see where that goes. There's still a number of charter school issues that are still alive in the General Assembly. There's some testing issues. These have to do more with the administrators are asking for flexibility on dates for testing, flexibility with retakes, flexibility in terms of third grade testing. Some of that looks like it's dead. Some of it might be alive. But it's not totally dead yet. Teach for America is another one that's out there. Looks like it'll probably go through. It might have some impact on us. I don't think a whole lot here. A lot of those programs really don't deliver as much as you anticipate they will. I've worked with Teach for America in my job before I came to Portsmouth. We had hired a couple of teachers over several years. There's still a live legislation on parent information on eating disorders that we have to disseminate to all parents. There's a Parents' Bill of Rights that's fairly extensive, but in the House has stricken education from that bill and not including in it. The Senate, it's still in there. There are bills on bullying and firearms, which are definition bills, and they have to do with defining those issues and then developing policies that would come from the state. There's a whole series of student growth measures for academic growth, which are still alive and part of what's going on. There are several reading and math intervention mandate initiatives that are still alive, and the Labor Day bill is dead, and the virtual courses and revenue flow bills that involve that are pretty much dead. That gives you a little bit of what's going on. That's probably about 25 bills. There's still another 60 we could talk about if we wanted to. We get very busy this time of year trying to track what's going on. But it's not over till it's over, and the General Assembly has hammered themselves out of session, and the governor signed the bills, and that's got a ways to go yet before it's done, folks. Any questions at all on that piece? Okay, let's move to school accreditation. And at this point, I think we've got an overhead right there. Speak to that. This is a history of accreditation of our schools. It's by percentages because we changed some schools from being K-12 schools to preschools. We closed some schools. Back in 2002-03, we had 23 schools of record. We're down to 19 as we consolidated schools for savings, transferred our smallest schools over to preschools. Look at the chart. That's when I arrived right here. That was when I came on the scene, January of 2003, just about 10 years ago. And you can see that for 7 years, we had a steady upward movement. Right in here, interestingly enough, is when Governor Warner was in office and when City Council made a commitment to raise teacher salaries.
That's right.
That took place about right here. And you saw what happened is we were able to hold teachers, retain teachers, attract teachers. It's all about teachers. In 2008-09, in the spring of 2009, we had all of our schools accredited. If you were to look at the state A to F thing, every school in Portsmouth would have had either an A or B. Okay, that was our high point. What's happened since then? We have graduation requirements now that we didn't used to. We have to have, our schools have to hit an 85 on the graduation index, which is basically 85% graduation rate, but it's not exactly that because it does include to a small extent students who stay in school, but we don't get full credit for them, and students that get GEDs. Pretty much you got to get them graduated on that scale. That's what happened this first year. Wilson and Norcom they did not make that rate. They've come up considerably in the last few years, but they did not make the graduation rate. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. That came in this year. That year right there is when we lost Brighton by 1 point. By 1 point, we lost Brighton. The next year we came back and Brighton came back, and we had this year right here, all the schools accredited according to SOL scores, but that's when graduation rate kicked in. And we lost Norcom and we lost Wilson due to graduation rates. We've been working on the graduation rates. They're coming up significantly. Churchland is up in the 90s, so it's not an issue on graduation rates. Wilson last year was into the low 80s. You got to get to 85, and Norcom was just about 80, I think. Maybe a little under 80, right around 80, 79, 80 last year. We keep working on that. So we went from 1 school to 2 schools, And this year, they put in the new math assessment. We lost Craddock by 1 point in one area. We lost Churchland Middle by 2 points in an area. And we have the 2 schools that are still working on graduation rates. And there's 4 schools. So, yeah, it's somewhat disturbing that we have a downward trend right here. I'm not going to say the funding went down and we went down, because this was our peak of funding right here. It's not a perfect causal relationship, but it's not helping. Because our class sizes, from 2009, class sizes K3 are up 2 students per classroom. Above 3, they're up 3 students per classroom. That makes a difference, okay? We're up 3 students. Money that we use for tutors is gone. That's been stripped out of our budget. Money we use for professional development has been stripped out. We depend on grant money for both of those, for tutoring and for staff development. We're living on grant money. There's no just general fund money for that. The question is, we got to talk about tonight, where do we go from here? What do we do? Let's talk about the last 5 years. We've lost over $15 million in funding. Don't blame the city. That's primarily a state issue. We lost $15 million. We have not received any additional funds from the city, however, absent some funds that were reallocated, but there was our money anyway. It was not new funding from the city. We've been able to maintain our facilities. We've worked on maintaining and struggled to maintain them with $4,000 missing from our capital projects budget. And we've been able to pretty much maintain a... 4 million, excuse me. Thank you. 4 million. We'll get back to that. We've been able to pretty much maintain accreditation in an environment that is getting more and more difficult and more challenging in a city that is, the poverty level is not helping us. Those are headwinds we're running into. And we're having enrollment increase. We've got about 200 more students than we did back then. So we're struggling. We struggle every day. We work hard every day. Everybody's out there working hard every day. So in terms of grades, all A's and B's. Here we would have had all A's and B's and 1 C. Here we had all A's and B's and 2 C's. And here we have all A's and B's and 3 C's and 1 D. So but we don't have any schools in focus. We don't have any schools that have lost their accreditation. That takes a number of years, but we do have to turn things around. We do need to turn things around.
Yes, sir. Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it the downward trend, and it sounds like in most cases just missed it, by a point here, a school there.
It's close.
But you mentioned the funding, the lack of funding from the state, or the cutback from the state. Is that what you attribute to the downward trend, though?
No, as I've said, it's not a causal relationship. But it's not helping us. If somebody said, "How can I help you?" I wouldn't say, "Well, take money away. It's going to help me."
But if you had to put your finger on,
it's a combination of higher standards. We weren't all through here. We weren't dealing with graduation rates, which you can't turn around in 1 year. It takes a lot longer to turn around graduation rates. And we can pretty much predict those moving from year to year. Like Wilson should make it this year. We should have the only one. Norcom might make it, but Wilson should definitely make it this year. So we'll have 2 of the 3 high schools make the graduation thing. I'm not going to attribute it directly. It's not like we lose this and we lose that. It's that pressure, plus class sizes are going up. Is that absolutely what's causing it? What's not helping it? Class sizes are going up. Tutoring money has disappeared. Staff development money has disappeared. We do go to grants for some of that, but we don't have what we used to have. We do not have the resources that we had back in '09 to meet these challenges.
You said your tutoring got stripped, correct?
Excuse me?
You said your funding for tutoring got stripped?
We've taken it out, yeah. As we lose money, when you're down $15 million, you got to start cutting something.
You just gave the city back $10 million, correct?
At the end of last year. That's correct.
And we gave you 9. Then we gave you back 4.5, correct? I mean, we couldn't put tutoring back in with that money, or you had to appropriate it somewhere else?
It's spent in other areas that need to be spent in.
Yeah.
We're down a lot of things. We'll go through that before we're done. That's not the only issue we're down in.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Stuckwich, also with the graduation rate, and I know it's a lot to explain or define, but the 11-12 figure, basically, you're paying for stuff that was in 06, 07, and 07, 08 because of the strand or the group of students that progressed from 07, 08. So you started behind the 8 ball anyway when the standard came. In other words, you're paying for past issues or what have you.
Yeah, all of this back here affects the graduation rate because it takes 13 years to grow a graduate.
Right.
They don't grow in a year or two.
Not stuck with, does the dropout rate have anything out of bearing on graduation rate as to how the state looks at board accreditation?
Yeah, you would think that the opposite of the graduation rate would be the dropout rate, but it isn't. The state has a number of different figures. Depends on exactly where they're calculating. What they call a dropout rate really doesn't reflect that accurately what's going on. The index does. What they do with the index is they mark every single student. They tag them, as they say, when they come into high school. Okay? And they tag them with their cohort when they come into high school. 4 years later, they go back and look for them. Every single student in Virginia has a number on them when they come in. It gets tagged with a number when they come into high school. 4 years later, they go looking for that number. If they can't find that number, it's assumed you're a dropout. So we have issues, and we've cleaned these up heavily. This is some of the issues we had at the beginning was just a bookkeeping issue where a student would leave and go out of state, and we couldn't find them. We literally couldn't find them. They were somewhere. Sometimes it's taken us months to find one student. But as soon as we find them, then that's fine. They go out of the equation because they've transferred to another school. But the accurate measurement, Bishop Edmonds, is the index. That's the one we deal with, and that's the one we deal with in terms of accreditation. So that's the one that we focus on and focus on it alone.
I think one of the things, too, we have to bear in mind, we are in a very mobile community when we look at the Tidewater area and look at the schools in the areas. With us being so close, we have a lot of in and out that's taking place around in the areas. And if you've noticed, it's not the influx coming in. A lot of times what has happened, those that have moved up economically and socially move out into areas that have different things that they may be looking for. And usually that is where you also lose some of your top-notch students, because once they get up to a certain grade, if the parents leave the area, then they go to an area and the first thing they look for is a quality education, because their children are moving on into adulthood and they want to make sure that they are prepared. But most of the groundwork has already been put in place when you look at those lower levels. If you give those children a firm foundation, they will build on it, regardless to what other things might come in place. And we've watched that happen. We've come a long ways in where we're going, and I believe we're going to still peak. But we need to make sure the funding is there, and we need to also ensure that parental involvement is a part of the formula. Because unless parental involvement is there, you can put all the money in the world out there, and that's not going to ensure that the students will have a quality education. So you need to bear that in the back of your mind as you look at your equations and your assessments.
To Councilwoman Randall's comment about parental involvement, how do you quantify that other than PTAs? And to that point, have you seen that pick up more parental?
I've never seen it quantified, Mr. Moody. You can get some.
I mean, is PTA membership a good barometer as any?
It rises and falls from time to time. It'll go up at one school, go down. A lot of it has to do with who the leadership in the PTA are and how hard they work with the principal to try to get folks to come out. But I've seen schools that, they'll get 100%. Our PTAs do pretty well in terms of percentages. When I go to the meetings, the regional meetings, and they give out awards for PTAs, we're always there getting a number of awards. I can't say every single school has a strong PTA, but the majority of them do.
I mean, just using for an example, I live close to Churchland Primary School. And when they have, I guess, maybe a parent-teacher thing, that school parking lot and hedgerow and
Sure.
all the streets are full, which gives me a good feeling. I say, hey, these parents are really into it. But there again, I was just wondering if there are any really benchmarks to be able to quantify whether.
There's nothing quantifiable that I've ever seen.
Right.
Mostly anecdotal.
No quantitative.
Yeah.
It's there, it's real, and the most important thing that we need parent involvement for is to work with students in terms of getting their work done, making sure they get their work done, supporting the schools when we need parent help to intervene, to get their children to behave better, okay, to be more studious in terms of taking care of the instruction. I will say this, that in any family where we have at least one responsible adult helping that child, we'll get them graduated from high school. Like Dr. Fisher, man, we have one responsible adult, they'll graduate from high school. Remember, we got to get 85%.
Yeah. And I wonder if there are programs around to help increase that involvement.
We have graduation coaches. We've had to put in recently. That's an expenditure. Like, you say, why didn't we spend money on this? We have to spend money on that. We've got graduation coaches that work with each schools, with each of our high schools. We know exactly what students have dropped out. We know them by name, and we constantly work on them. We meet every month. We have a graduation meeting with the high school principals and the guidance counselors, wanting to know where are we, who's dropped out, who have you found, who did you get back in, who did you get into a GED program. We constantly work at it. Each summer, the school at their retreat, each high school comes in and goes through that cohort, that graduation cohort, student by student, and tells them what happened to that child. Whether they went to high school, whether they went to college, whether they went to trade school, whether they went to military, whether they got a GED, or whether they dropped out. We're responsible for every single child. We have every single one of those childs tagged, and we know where they are.
In the high school, how large are the classes in the high school?
They vary. I'd ask Dr. Fisher to help me out on that one, my deputy superintendent.
They will vary by core areas. For example, in mathematics and English, you might find a lower pupil-teacher ratio, somewhere between 24, 23, 24, 25. The state requirement calls for or allows up to 35 in most of the elementary schools. We try our best not to put 35 students in a classroom. So our ratio may not be as it is with the state. And that is because we've been able to function with the funding and so forth and keeping our teachers on board. With the English, you will also find about 23 to 25. As you get into social studies, that may go up a little bit higher. But typically, our class sizes have been very much right on target with where we need to be for our challenges.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Nance.
Another thing about the formulation for the graduation rates, if I was a 4-year high school student and I lacked 1 credit of graduation and went to summer school, okay, to graduate in the summer, I would not count as 1 whole student as far as graduation rate. I would count as 3/4 of a student. And see, that's a conflict of what we've all known who know higher ed, because many kids in higher ed who are supposed to graduate in 4 years either graduate in 4.5 or 5 years. So even if we went on to December to graduate that child, it counts against us further. It really, the math isn't fair. Okay. It's where the state and higher ed and regular ed are talking out of both sides of their mouth. If you saw the kids we graduated in summer school, or the kids we graduated in 4+ years, you'd probably be amazed. Another thing is those who complete the requirements before the 4 years and we send on to first college. We don't get extra credit for those. It doesn't count as 1 1/4 or 1.1. But this graduation rate thing seems to have been designed by somebody in Vegas, where we really started, we could not succeed. If you looked at the figures from 06, 07, 07, 08, we could not meet that graduation requirement, no matter what. Those were impossible numbers.
Sir?
Just 2 questions real quick. Dr. Fisher, you had said that at the high school level, some of our classrooms are at 23, 25 students. Dr. Stuckwich, you had alluded to at the very beginning that our K through 3rd and 3rd grade and above has increased by 2 students and 3 students. Do we have any hard numbers as of like today, what a class size looks like in K through 3 and above?
K3 will have to vary depending on the standard that the state has allowed for that school. All of our schools do not have the same ratio. For example, we have schools where for grades K3, the largest class size must be 20, or you have an average of 16 students in the classroom. And we do have schools where that it's a socioeconomic thing. So what happens with that, when the state attaches it, we have to comply within it. Now there are other schools that might go up to 22 with respect to the largest class size for K3 only. When it comes to 4, 5, and 6, it can go up to 35.
And so what you're saying is that we are well within those numbers?
Well, right now, we have been able to be within those numbers.
On average.
But as the class size, as the population grows, and we are short in terms of staff and teachers, that number could be impacted.
Of course. And then the second thing, you know, we talked a little bit about the whole parental involvement, and the question was asked about, is there any quantifiable analysis or data to look at and so forth. With regards to that, we've had to cut tutors and staffing development out of the budget up to this point. Sure, we do have PTAs and so forth, but maybe a fair question that we could also ask too is how well are we doing with reaching out to parents and getting parents involved? Now, I don't know how you go about doing that. I know that the traditional approach or so forth would be to look through the PTAs, but in a day and age where you have less resources and more, I don't want to say problems, but more challenges, you have to start thinking outside the box. So maybe one direction we need to look at is how could we better come up with better ways to reach out to parents to make them more welcome to participate in schools.
That is usually at the school level.
Correct.
That has to do with the school leadership.
Sir?
One of the, each year the schools are required, our schools are required to submit a school improvement plan. Now, only the schools that are not accredited, they would officially would have to submit a school improvement plan, but we require every one of our schools to submit. And those schools present their plans to the director of instruction and the instruction department. Two of the indicators, I mean, you have all the academics where you set your goals, where the state sets the goals, but two of them deal with the graduation rate, and the other one deals with what you've been talking about parental involvement. And two of the indicators that traditionally schools have used is the number of parents participating in PTAs. And the other indicator that Mr. Lamb has brought up is the number of volunteers that are increasing from year to year. So you do have parents that volunteer, and you're correct, we've got to find ways to attract parents to come to school. We don't want parents staying out of school. We want to invite them. But those are two indicators. And the other indicator that schools have used in the past is that there are a lot of young men that need fathers to mentor. We need men to come in and mentor these young men. And we've tried to increase the number of fathers to come in and mentor. And so they've had clubs, father clubs, that would take on some guys and try to help them. So there are a lot of strategies that we're using in the school system, but you can't make parents come in. Only thing you can do is continually invite and invite and invite and keep the doors open and keep that line of communication open so that parents will want to come. And Ms. Randall is right on target when you talk about, I mean, teachers can do their very best, but if you do not have the cooperation of the parents working with the teacher, it's sometimes very difficult. So.
Doc?
Ready? Any questions on this before we move on? The next slide. Okay, this is, I've got to thank my colleague, Jim Roberts over in Chesapeake. He sent me this.
Yeah.
He shared it with the other Region 2 folks. What we've got is a bar graph showing total state revenue. Now, we're talking about state, we're not talking about the city, we're talking about the state of the Commonwealth. That's our total revenue picture, and this is direct aid to public education over those years. You can see what happened. We all know that everything crashed back in 07, 08. But in 08 is not when it hits the state, because of tax collection, it happens the next year. So when everything crashed in 08, it hit the state in 09. You can see this, how much state revenue dropped. But since 2010, Virginia's done all right. That state revenue going up at a steady streak.
But it didn't down.
Not so with the funding of public education by the state. From 2010 to the present at the state, you're seeing a 13% increase in revenue. And if you look at their aid to public schools, and they are the ones who are supposed to take care of public education. The city's just supposed to sort of supplement it. Their funding for education is 7%. So it's less than, it's about half the rate at which the state grew, that they grew us back. You say, what does the state do with their money? My understanding, most of it is going into Medicaid, which they have very little control over, even though they're one of the lowest Medicaid funding states in the U.S. But a lot of it's going into the rainy day fund at the state level. It's not going into education right now. So that's where most of our problems coming from, is from state funding. And we depend heavily on the state.
Got about $300 million in their rainy day fund.
We have a very low composite index in Portsmouth. The composite index is the formula that the state uses to fund public schools. It's based on property taxes, income taxes, and sales taxes.
That's right.
The lower your composite index, the more your state funding. But when you have a low composite index and you depend heavily on the state, when the state cuts, people with the lowest composite index get hurt the most. And that's what's happened to us over the last few years. We have really been on the receiving end of those cuts. Just put that up there, go to the next slide, just show what we're doing. Here is our total funding issue. All of our funds over the last 5 years. And I've superimposed on that the graph of our attendance. What you're seeing right here is our attendance of actual students that come into the school division in the elementary levels is pretty stable right now. Might be growing a tad, a little bit. Didn't used to grow. First couple of years I was here, we were dropping like a rock. But this growth in here is due to keeping kids in high school. And that's why the graduation rates are going up. We're getting a better prepared student coming out of elementary school into the middle schools. We're getting a better prepared student come out of the middle schools into the high schools. That's where your graduation rates come up. It takes 13 years to grow a high school senior. You don't turn graduation rates around in a year or two. So the good news is you should see graduation rates keep eking up because if for no other reason than the stronger students that are coming through the school system. Add to that we've got graduation coaches working out there. We've got our attendance officers working out there. We have white cap counselors working in our schools, all working to convince our students to stay in school. But it's really their decision whether they're going to stay in school. We have to have the programs that cause them to want to come to school. We can't push them into school, because if you push them into school, they'll go out the back door. want to come to school.
To make it.
On your last chart you had, Mrs. Duckwitch, could you click back for a second?
Yeah, we can go back. Okay.
At the peak of '08, you were at 5.7 million.
Yeah, that's the state as a whole.
I
The whole
understand.
state.
I understand.
Yeah. No, that's
Their sales
that's
is
billion. These
right,
are
I mean billion.
Big numbers.
They're at 15.7. Then in 13, they're at 16.4, and they're at 5.1. So
Yeah.
what do you think is off? Maybe 800,000 to a million.
I mean, to make them
Yeah.
equal, it would be, we've come up about 362 million. The state's gone up about 2.2 billion.
Billion.
It would, to equal them, we would have to come up from the state, the whole state would have to fund education with probably a little over 300 million. Come back, about 300 million. Something like that. And those are just horseback figures off the top of my head. As we look at this graph, this is our, actually, the money that this is our revenue from year to year. You can see our high back in 8, 9. Markets crash back here, but it takes time for it to hit us, okay? This is when we really hit. This is where, as we kept cutting staff, we want to know, where did those overages come from? Where did we get that dispendable income? Because when you cut positions, if you're going to cut to get to that level, you can't cut this year. You got to cut this year. And when you cut those positions in this year, there is revenue there. That's where we went through that last round. I'm not going to beat that horse to death today. These little upsurges right here, this is reflects when the city 2 years ago gave us 2.1 million in risk management money, which was our money in the risk management pool. So that increase was funded with our own money. This increase, we all know about, that came from the capital projects issue last year. There's about 4.9 million. If you were to lower these, we're just about at level funding. So we are down significantly from where we were there. This is projected for this year based on what city administration figures have given us and the governor's budget. But the governor's budget right now doesn't look a whole lot different than the budget coming out of the House and the Senate. It's negligible in terms of funding. So there's, go back a minute, Mark. If we go from our high water mark down to where we are in our projected budget for next year, we're down about $15 million. We're trying to operate the school system on $15 million less than we had back in 2009. Let's go to the next slide. Folks sometimes ask, what do we spend our money on? This is an objects budget. Basically shows how money is spent. Over and over again, you'll hear me say we are a people business. Salaries, benefits. You're looking at, what, 70% of the graph, more than that? 75%. So when you talk about reducing the budget, you either deal with people or you got to work everything out of this little capsule over there. Sometimes folks will ask me, what are purchase services? Purchase services are things like computer contracts that we do with electronic providers, bus maintenance, copiers, pest control, HVAC, painting, some things like that we occasionally get into if we can't do it ourselves. Everybody understands what utilities are. You can see how small a part of our budget instructional supplies is. Here's CSEP budget right here. Gives you an idea of the cost of special education. That's only CSEP and nothing else. We've still got a lot of other special education beyond CSEP. There's our facilities maintenance, and there's local matches and transfers out.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Stuckwich,
Yes,
on the facility maintenance, that less than 1%, is that going to lead to a situation? I know we were in maybe before your tenure here, some deferred maintenance issues.
Yes.
That's going to come back. The old Midas ad, pay me now or pay me later. Is that keeping up with the maintenance?
Maintenance right now, let's get into that. Let me answer that at the end. I'll show you where we are with maintenance.
Okay,
We're robbing Peter to pay Paul and working on it. We're trying to keep things up. We're trying to be as proactive as we can about maintenance. I believe we're doing a better job than we used to do, but we can do a better job. We just need more money, do a better job. Let's go to the next one, and this is the categorical budget. Everyone knows that we fund and we present our budget always by category. We report out to the state by category. Instruction is the vast majority of the categorical budget. Counts for almost 75%. Occasionally here in Richmond, when they want to pass a law that we got to put 65% of our money in instruction, we get 75% in instruction. Administration, about 3.9%, less than 4%. Transportation is about 5%. Technology is about 3%. Operations is about 11%. And then local matches and transfers out are about 2.7%. That's you're looking at a categorical budget right there. Primarily instruction. Our budget is primarily instruction and operations and transportation. That pretty much sums up our budget. Those are pretty consistent from year to year. Any questions on budget by object or budget by category? We can cut it either way. Okay, let's get finally down to talking about the budget itself. Right now we're looking at revenue. As we look across the screen, you're looking at your revenue from 2008-9, projected revenue as we look at 2013-14. Not a fun thing to look at. Let's look at city funding first. This little uptick here is, of course, that risk management money, that one-time funds that came into the school board, and the uptick over here is represented by the money that came in last year, the 4.9. Okay, would be that uptick. It's this plus this. This year, the figure that we're working with right now is 871, 532, which that number is a net decrease of 920,000 from where we were with the city 5 years ago. So we're actually down in terms of funding for the last 5 years. Nothing compared to the situation we deal with at the state. Okay, state, 5 years ago we're at 87 million. Today we're at 70 million. Okay, we are down from the state actually at over $17 million. The only thing that brings it up a little bit is if you go down to sales tax is up by almost $2 million, which brings us back to 15. Else we would be down in just general basic aid, we're down by 17 million.
That's right.
This money right here indicates the stimulus, which kind of kept us going through that middle of this thing, why we weren't having these problems a few years ago. That added also to those overages we talked about last year, because you can't take stimulus and pay salaries with them. If you're paying salaries with them, what are you going to do next year when the stimulus disappears? You can't build up your workforce. You can't make commitments to folks. Correct. You put it into one-time things. We put it primarily into facilities, which is why we're in pretty good shape with facilities, which we'll get to. So as we sit here today, from 5 years ago, we're down 15,003,283. Enrollment's up about 175. And that's about as bleak as it gets. Never dealt with things as bad. In the past, we were able to make cuts to balance the budget. We've cut almost 500 positions out of the school system since '06. That's about $23 million. So we've made our cuts. It gets harder and harder every year to make those cuts. If we have to make more cuts, class size will start going up again. It'll go beyond 3.
So the $4 million is your shortfall for this year?
Right now, as we start the budget and put nothing new into it, Mayor Wright, we're down $4 million. When we get go, we start off $4 million in the hole.
What happened to the 8? It was reported out that you had an $8 million gap.
Oh, that's the next page. It's bigger than that. Okay. Yeah. We go to the next page. This is what we need. This year, when I was talking to the school board, they said, you know, what do you want to do? And my marching orders were give the city what we need to run the school system, to run it properly, because the state says school board should ask for what they need. And they said, we want you to do that literally this year. There are 4 items in here that are new. The top 2, If you see at the top of that list, utilities and insurance, those are new costs to us, but those are what we call must-fund items. I don't have any control, just like the city doesn't have any control. We have no control over our electrical rates, our waste removal rates, our fuel, our gas, and so forth, our natural gas. We have to pay those, and we have very little control over insurance. We work with it, we rebid it. We're looking at self-insurance, but we've been told it really won't save that much. It just helps us to try to even it out over the years. So those would be the top two. Those are new expenditures into the budget. The other one is a bonus for 10-month employees who don't get paid over extended holidays and intended time off, which causes them hardship. And there's the 2% salary increase, and that is across the board. This figure, that figure, those two. Everything else up here is really what I call a debris field. It shows everything that we've cut over the years. Sort of like when a tornado hits and you see everything spread out across the ground. That's what all this stuff is. Do we need it? Yes, we need it. But at the end of the day, I have to balance the budget. Something's got to go, and we have to set priorities. We get together with the board, you sharpen your pencil. It's painful, but we have to get it done. We cannot overspend our budget, and we don't overspend our budget. You know, what's happened in the last few years, we've closed the production center, we've closed automotive, we've closed nursing, we've closed TV production. We've cut 594 positions since '06. And as I've said, tutoring funds are down, staff development, and class size is up because we've cut 180 teachers. Just over the last 5 years. We've cut some before then and reduced. We keep reducing and reducing and cutting and cutting.
But one thing you also have to bear in mind when we think in terms of meeting the expectations and the quality of what you expect in there, that the teacher-pupil ratios, whenever they rise up, you have to find that money someplace else, and that's where we're running into a problem. We have to make sure that the funding is there to meet the needs of these children as they come up. And expectations are getting greater. And we are putting less money in the pot to bring it up. You aren't going to elevate it until we can find some way to put the money, the funding there, to make sure you have small enough class sizes where teachers can really get in and work with the children who need the needs. If the students come in and they are not prepared, it costs you twice as much money to elevate that child to the level of performance where they can be successful as citizens, because they got to make a living too.
They're pushing for efficiencies, and they're trying to say that if we become more efficient, a lot of these things will come out and work its way out. And
right.
That's just not so.
It's
in
not
urban cities, and the way we manage what we're doing here is not a mathematical model that you can apply.
Last budget slide.
That's right.
We'll talk a little bit about staff capital projects before we
right on top.
This, in a nutshell, shows you what we're dealing with. That gives you. These are all of our revenue sources: our federal funds, state funds, city funds, all of our other funds that come in. So we're looking at, as we've said, and this just reflects what's 2 pages earlier. $136,382,000 expenditures. That's that first page where we're 4 in the hole, plus the second page is 151,540. So we're down $15 million to work. And you say, well, $15 million, that's an unrealistic figure. That's how much we've been cut in the last 5 years by the state. If the state hadn't cut us, this budget would be balanced right now. So it sounds like an unimaginable figure. Believe me, that's what we cut out of the budget. And with more students, and with higher standards that we've got to meet. And we say, what's the way forward? We just need some help from the city so that we can give the 2% teacher raise. Morale is critical. I know it's kind of an amorphous term, but it is real. It is out there that we can. I would hate to send that money back to the state and say we can't come up with the rest of the money to give the raise. Restore some of the teachers to offset that climbing Class size, there are key classes, Dr. Fisher knows them well, where we need key schools, key grade levels, where we need to put teachers back in and drop those, and those are generally at our most at-risk schools, where class size becomes very, very critical. We stripped all of our teaching assistants out of kindergarten. There are none. We need to try to build that back. That's in this budget. What I've said, as I've said, it's like a debris field of all the things that we've taken out. Board says, what does it look like if we start putting them back? And not everything's back. Trust me, not everything's back. It's just what we put back. So there's one course where you guys can help us. The other is we get ignored like we did for the last 5 years and basically get level funding. And the last is you can damage us by decreasing our funding or going to something like quarterly appropriation where you decrease our funding at the end of the year. So it's up to what the city wants to do.
Dr. Stuckwich, what were the expenditures from last year's budget, actual expenditures?
Actual expenditures?
Yeah.
We balanced the budget, so it looked like the revenue. And that's, yeah, they would reflect the revenue.
That's due.
I would need Mrs. Baltanker here to answer that question accurately.
In our meeting we had last Wednesday, we talked about the OPED. You fully funded that. Was that, I'm just asking, stimulus OPED? Is that stimulus money, one-time money?
It's a combination of the one-time stimulus money and the money that was left over from cutting positions.
Well, it was $6.5 million that could have came back that we could have helped fund the following year.
Well, you've got to say to yourself, do we look at the long term or do we look at the short term? And we looked at the long term when we fund OPEB. We felt that we did something that will benefit the school division and the city for years ahead by fully funding OPEB.
And almost 700% is, I mean, is that norm to fund it to that level?
We funded it so that it doesn't have to be funded again.
Again, meaning
for perpetuity.
Perpetuity?
Yes.
That's a lot of. So that's a lot of money. I mean, what was the rationale in doing that all at once instead of just budgeting it each year?
Because we were putting about $1 million a year into it. That frees up that $1 million to start buying school buses. We felt it was a good long-term investment. It's a good investment. You have to look at long-term investment, short-term investments. It was a good long-term investment.
But you could have used that money to buy the school buses. You could have funded ARC and had $6 million to buy school buses.
We could have, yes, sir.
Okay, so that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, just me.
I understand.
Your 2% increase across the board for salaries. Is that $2 million? That's $2 million for your 2% raise?
A 2% rate across the board.
Does that include? But you said it was help.
That would include everyone, not
help
just
from the state. You said it was partial.
Yeah, part of that about $900,000 would come from the state. But that's already figured into the revenue. If we don't give it at all, then we have to take that revenue figure from the state and cut it by about $900,000.
So $900 from the state. So you'd be looking for $1.1 million to. Is that what you're saying?
We would need to fully fund it. We would need about $1.1 million. Yes, sir.
I don't know. To me, I agree with my colleagues. OPEB funding to that tune, especially when you're cash strapped, just doesn't seem like good budgeting to me.
Well, according to this, he could have bought the school buses and still had $4.9 million left after you funded ARC. So I'm just not. I'm not getting there.
In 2000, so you have an asset. 2011, you had 587,000.
Right.
You were at 99%. 2010, you had 592 as an asset. The city carries a liability. Our liability is around $55 million.
Right.
Last year, we supposed to pay $16 million. We were only able to fund that by $4.5 million.
Almost for
the city.
Yeah.
You know, we're all here. We need the money for the schools. We don't want to slight the schools one bit. Nobody up here does. But at the same time, we still got to be good stewards of the money that the citizens pay taxes with. And when we meet, it's going to be how to get to this number right here.
That we're looking at the red line.
And we have to work together, so I guess we're going to ask if a situation like that comes up again, we would much rather you to give the money and let us reappropriate the money back.
I'll be glad to talk to you guys. That's been a problem in the past, communication.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it almost looks like, well, instead of giving it back and having it reappropriated, that we don't trust those guys and girls to give it back, so we're going to put it all in the post-employment benefit fund. OPEG. I mean, that's what has the appearance of that. So.
Well, appearances can be deceiving.
Well, sometimes.
In lots of things.
Someday down the road, people in the city are going to thank us for doing that, for funding OPEB, because it's one less liability that actually helps the city's issues. That takes away one more debt that the city has corporately with the school division.
But that would have made this number you're looking at now.
Excuse me, sir?
That would have made the number you're looking at now 10 million instead of 15 million.
I don't expect that the city's going to be able to.
9 million.
This is what our needs are.
Right.
The board said we need to display the needs. We've displayed the needs. Any help the city can give us will be appreciated. At the end of the day, we have to wait for the General Assembly to make their decisions. We have to wait for City Council to make their decisions. Depending on where we are, we sharpen our pencils. We have to balance the budget. We've come through some very, very strange times. Admittedly, very strange times. I believe that over those times, because we did have some capital because of the cuts and because of the stimulus, we were able to take care of capital projects. That's why as we segue into capital projects, I'm not asking the city for capital projects money. We've taken care of capital projects because it was an ideal time to take, and again, 20 years down the road, somebody's going to look back and say, Stuckwish knew what he was doing when he was superintendent. The schools are in good shape. We got those capital projects done at record costs because of the condition of the economy. Every one of the projects came in way below what the architects ever said they would, or our engineers said it would cost. So we don't come before you tonight asking for capital project money. We do want to remind you that we do have a problem at Churchland High School. That's beyond anybody to solve right now. It's about $18 million to solve that problem. We've talked that. I don't want to kick that dead horse around, but it's just to remind you, it's still out there. Someday it's going to have to be addressed. It doesn't have to be addressed this year, but we do have a full-time plumber out there every day just trying to keep the thing running.
But is any of that, I was going to ask that question when I asked about the maintenance, the less than 1% maintenance. Is any of that in that 0.9%?
No, that's really reflected in our operations budget, Mr. Moody.
Ms. Williams.
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Wright. I was going to say that we were asked to come and present our budget to you, the needs that we have for our schools and our kids. And Dr. Stuckwish's presentation, he talked about long-term investments and the fact that I think down the road you will thank him for doing what he has done. It might not be the way that you would do it or whatever, but he is our superintendent and the board did approve and agree with him doing it that way for the long-term investment. That was my key point, that it may not make sense to you at this time, but it made good sense to us.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to chime in one thing, because I came through the system, through the good, bad, and the ugly. And that's how I'm going to give it, good, bad, and ugly. When we started off, and we had absolutely nothing in. And that was my motivation, that I would be around long enough to see our children have what they needed to be responsible citizens in this city. because we started with bare nothing. Not only that, there were inequities. And I'm just laying it out there as it was. That was my motivation for going on city council, because I believe, and it's still my philosophy, because it was instilled in me in Columbia University, that if you start and build from the bottom, as that tree grows and anchors itself, it's going to branch out. And the leaves and things will spread out, and the fruits from it will grow forth. That's true. And I watched that happen in Portsmouth. And we've come a long ways. It wasn't, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Nance, because I remember you as a little boy. I'm not that old. I just have gray hair. Just want you to understand that. And I know when we didn't have paper and things for the children to write on, and we were writing on paper bags in the schools that I taught in, and Mr. Parent that you came through. And we've come a long ways. And we don't need to get to a point where our children are identifying where we have come as they have branched out all over the United States. And we are proud of our output products. But we don't need to cut them off at the knees when they can sprout forward. It's going to be a tremendous strain on us and strain on the city to get us where we need to go. But we can't keep, because we've been there and picked up the chips to start a fire in the building, Mr. Parent, to have the classroom warm.
Right.
And I'm not an old lady, this is just gray hair. But I'm telling you the way it was. Now that we are at a point where we can make intelligent decisions to promote the next generation, where our output products can be greater and go into different areas, we need to think outside of the box, but think in terms of what do we need to put in the box to make sure that that plant grows and we'll be able to do something to make a difference in our city. And it's not an easy thing to do, because I can remember working with the newspaper to teach children to write on it. And I'm a young woman, so don't try to figure out my age. But children learn how to write on newspaper because we didn't have regular paper. Now that we are able to give them a regular sheet of paper and a pencil, we want to give them an environment that they can feel proud about. And that's the way I feel about education. Because we don't train them now, they aren't going to make anything any better for your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren. We're going to have to reach back in the box. We can find money for anything else we want to find. Why not find it and put it in our greatest product? And that's the future generation. If we can't grow the trees, forget about the leaves. They aren't going to be there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Wright. When you talk about capital improvement projects, I think back as a former principal, to me, it's a marketing issue. Because when you go into a facility, you look around whether or not it's a safe, attractive place. I mean, you evaluate the area, and if you don't feel safe or you don't feel it's attractive, chances are you're not going to stay there. Well, we've been trying to market, and we're marketing, of course, in public schools. And when you have military, you have people moving in, and they come to your school. You want your school to be as attractive and clean as possible. There was a time when not all of our schools were air conditioned. They are air conditioned now. We have gyms for our gyms that we have built. I mean, we have the best. We have done our homework. We've invested in our schools to make them attractive and safe, where parents will want to come to school. Now, if we could have waited on some of these projects, sure, we could have done that. But they would not be the state of the art they're in now. And that's what parents look for, because they can shop around. They can pretty well go any place they want to go. And Portsmouth, if we want to continue to attract people coming into the community, then our schools have got to be first-class schools, because people look for quality. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the superintendent a question, because I want to make sure that we get this broken down the way it should be, so you'll know what the true facts are, and then he has a statement. Explain that $52 million.
Okay, the famous $52 million. Mark, would you please hand out the spreadsheet on that? We'll know exactly where we're at.
I thought we weren't gonna beat that dead.
We're not going to
He asked it, I didn't.
We're not going to
No, we're going to say, we're going to give you in simple facts.
We just don't give you just in plain writing that you can see it. We don't need to be.
We didn't ask about the $52 million. Did anybody want to hear about the $52 million?
No.
Well, I'll make it part of my presentation, because I'm tired of hearing that number, because that number's not accurate.
Wait a minute. We did not bring up $52 million.
Okay.
I don't know how we got hung up on capital projects, because we didn't question those either.
Okay.
So, I mean, unless there's something you just feel compelled to tell us.
No, he doesn't have to tell. We're just going to give it to you in presentation. He doesn't have to talk about it.
I was here tonight when he strung the papers across the back wall there. I mean, unless Mr. Meeks or Ms. Simmons want to hear it.
I think the paperwork is clear.
We'll just leave it to paperwork. We'll leave it to paperwork.
It's just for public information. We've heard it so much.
So have me. That's my point.
But I guess it wouldn't hurt to put it out there again, maybe.
And
the question is,
And this is our presentation to you. So
Mr. Mayor, it's up quite frequently.
it comes up all the time.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
We didn't bring it up.
No, we didn't.
Mr. Mayor, can I say one
Yes,
thing?
sir. Go ahead.
I believe that communication between the city administration and school administration will go a long way to solving a lot of the issues that we've run into over the last few years.
Yes. We didn't do
I will say this, I've talked to Mr. Rowe more in the last 3 months than I've talked to the city administration for the last 5 years. I'm just telling you the truth.
that's the truth.
Perfect example of working with Mr. Rowe, we have to get out of Burton's Point. It's flooding down there.
Right.
So we started moving our folks over to Clark, because we do have space over there, not renovating, just moving them over to Clark. The problem that we had at the end is we've got the bus garage, okay? And we're trying to cobble enough money together to build a Butler building over behind Clark to house the buses. And we're working with city planning to do that.
Yeah.
Mr. Rowe steps in and says, we'll do the buses for you.
that's right.
It's like, we've been asking the city to do that for 5 years.
That's right.
And this man comes on and says,
And he
we'll do it
does
right
it.
now.
do
So
it.
that saves us $2 million, probably what would have been, that we would have had to cobble together to try to build that building.
Oh, okay.
So that it's a benefit to the city, because size and numbers, that makes their garage run more efficiently. We'll get better service because it's a bigger outfit, is much more flexible. I'd like to thank Mr. Rowe for that. These are the kinds of things that we can work on if we communicate and work together.
That's right.
Had we been communicating better, that OPEB might have gone a different direction.
That's right.
But I'm just being honest.
That's right.
Just be dead. That's where we need to start. Let's talk to each other, find out where we're going, and we got to build some trust between us, because with the challenges this city has, both the city and the schools, we have tremendous challenges that we're facing. We got to work together. We can't be working against each other, because we're all going to go down if we get into a war and start working against each other. We will be. I find it very easy to work with Mr. Rowe. We'll be very transparent. We've had some good meetings since he's been on, and we're ready to go forward. We look forward to working with you.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Stuckworth and all the school board members. All right, you guys have done a super job with the schools. I'm high on education, as all our colleagues are. And we want to make sure we have the best schools possible. We still have a lot more that we can do. Out-of-the-box thinking certainly is the order of the day. But making sure that we have dialogue and have transparency in what we're doing, I think we all will get along better. Because we all want the same ends. It's just the means in which we go about getting there. Robbing Peter to pay Paul works sometimes. But sometimes Paul needs to find out if he's being robbed. So. And I think more dialogue that we do.
That's accountability.
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 I think the better we'll get. So I'm happy with our schools. And you're right. When I go into some of the schools, I look around and I feel good about being there, air conditioned, gyms all over the place, no portable units. It's just amazing to see all that has happened in a short period of time. So I commend you on that effort and keep up the good work in that regard. Just keep us informed of what's going on.
Mr. Nance.
I'm not sure where the superintendent's talking about the school buses or what have you, but when the city maintained our yellow and white fleet previously, decades ago, we got away from that contract because of the rising costs with the city. And I think only 3 or 4 years ago, we hit the level of what the city was charging back then. So that's why that service is contracted now to another outfit, because the cost that increased when the city was maintaining those vehicles for us.
I think it took us 15 years to get back to that.
Right. It was over 15 years.
Yeah, I think as the dialogue has improved, you know, and I've said to my colleagues a million times, I think 99% of the world's problems can probably be solved with good communication. I think we ought to look for other opportunities to save monies and do things together. Having two of everything, when we all, there's only 2 floors separating City Hall and the school board. So I think we ought to look for opportunities to finance wherever it is. If we can have one, we ought to do it. We ought to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you and Mr. Rowe have probably had those conversations. But if you haven't, we need to, and they need to continue, because we got to get together on this. We're never going to make those gaps if we don't. And we got to come together. If we're really for Portsmouth and we're really for the kids, we all got to get in together and make it happen. You can't do it alone, and we can't do it alone. We can't, you know, and just throwing money out there without looking at where we can save money isn't going to do it, because we're going to run out of money, because the citizens, you know, we'll have one place to get it.
You seen any opportunities, John, talking to the superintendent, that we can do some shared services and saving, combining some efforts?
Yeah. We've already combined bus maintenance. We're moving on that.
That's a good start, but we need to look for other places. I mean, we got 2 finance departments. We got 2 of other things. We ought to look at if there's some human resources. We ought to look at if there's some savings that we can do some things and that money can be put back into the school system or wherever we need it. You know. But we got to look at those opportunities.
2 insurance carriers.
Yeah, all those things. But I want to thank you know, Dr. Stuck, with you and the school board members for coming out. I think it's been very, very fruitful. Don't take my comments to be as adversarial. Like you say, I would have done it a different way. But I wouldn't sit at that table when you looked at the things you looked at to decide how you did that. Just from what I saw on this paper this time, didn't look like the way I would have done it. That's all I was trying to say. But I want you all really. I'm serious about this dialogue and finding ways to save monies. And you know, you talk about the communication problems from 4 to 6. I hope they're gone. I hope they're gone between you guys. I'm pretty sure they're gone between us and you all. So if we can get them to disappear between you all, the future will be very bright for our kids and everybody else.
Yep, absolutely. Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one last point. I think at the last joint meeting that we had with council and school board, we did bring up about looking at the health care, pooling our resources, trying to save money. And then we were told that the city is self-insured or something, and until we became self-insured, they would not look at it. But I would like for us to do that. That was brought up before, because Norfolk does it with the school system.
I think one of the issues they looked at in those analysis is the high cost for the female teachers. And at what point do you blend that in and tell a city employee that you now got to pay a higher rate because we just merged with the teacher?
Well, that was
How do we do that?
That was the excuse they used. Yeah. But Norfolk did it with Norfolk Public Schools, and it was cheaper. Right. They have the same ratio of female teachers. But that was just some resistance of looking at it, so we seriously want a report and not people just saying that this, that, and the other. We need some facts, is what I'm saying.
Mr. Rowe, can we look at that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We will.
Along with all the other things.
Yeah, if you go from 1,980 to almost over 4,000 people, of course it's going to be a savings.
That is.
I mean,
Makes
it
a
might,
difference.
just on the blended cost basis.
And that should offset somewhat the teacher aspect.
That's right.
And I mean, when we met with John, I thought that dialogue was good. I'm new, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions. It's not.
Be different.
I don't want you to, think I'm being aggressive, but I need to know the information, so I can come back and tell my colleagues the right, the right opinion.
You get the big bucks for.
Yeah, exactly.
Your job is to ask us questions. I should have answers.
We don't mind answering.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this up. Yes, sir.
Talk about the self-insured. We had a meeting Friday, and it's not going to be so much about cost. It's going to be more about stabilization. We've had our first meeting on that last Friday. Right now, cost is not the initial thing that we're looking at, but more like stabilization.
Okay.
Last comment?
Another thing that's being done on a risk management type basis is where the insurance pool or the health insurer does not cover the live birth, where that is an underwritten cost with a savings type account from like the school system or the city. One thing that you've got to look at is our experience rating with respiratory and coronary illness with regard to that sick building that we've got on Cedar Lane. And that's contributing it's a main contributing factor to our experience rating being such a negative. We have a higher incidence of pneumonia there this year than any of the schools combined. So until that problem's dealt with, then the wellness of the employees in that building are going to certainly be an issue. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I want to thank y'all for coming.
I think
John
good.
You good?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.